They say the prayer circle is the safest place on earth. A place where you hold hands, close your eyes, and let your guard down before God. I was standing there that Wednesday night, squeezed between my husband Marcus and my best friend of 15 years, Sarah. We had shared everything: our secrets, our kids' birthdays, our deepest fears about motherhood and marriage. Pastor Reynolds was leading us in a powerful prayer about healing and restoration. The Wednesday night prayer service at Faith Covenant Church always drew about 50 of us. The faithful core, the intercessors, the ones who showed up when it wasn't Sunday morning and the sanctuary wasn't full. I felt a tear roll down my cheek as Pastor prayed over struggling marriages, asking God to break every chain of the enemy. I felt so blessed to have such a godly support system. My husband on one side, my best friend on the other, my church family surrounding me. Then, I felt Sarah's grip on my hand tighten. I'd noticed she'd been acting strangely for the past few weeks, giving me long looks during service, opening her mouth like she wanted to say something and then stopping herself. That very afternoon, she'd texted me asking if we could talk after prayer service about something important. I'd assumed it was about her daughter or maybe a financial struggle she was facing. I had no idea. She leaned into my ear, her breath warm against my skin. I thought she was going to whisper an amen or maybe a scripture of comfort, the way we'd done for each other hundreds of times over the years. Instead, she whispered 10 words that shattered my soul while the rest of the church was shouting, "Hallelujah! I'm sleeping with him, Diane. I'm doing it to save his soul." She didn't let go of my hand. She just kept praying out loud with the others, like she had just shared a divine revelation instead of a confession of adultery. And the worst part? My husband Marcus didn't flinch, didn't pull his hand away from hers on the other side, didn't open his eyes or show any sign of surprise. Because he was already in on the miracle. My name is Diane Mitchell. I'm 43 years old, and up until that Wednesday night prayer circle, I thought I had a good life, a solid marriage, a best friend I'd trust with my life, a position as women's ministry leader at Faith Covenant Church, where I'd been a member for 12 years, ever since Marcus and I got married and moved to this city for his job. Marcus and I met in college. He was pre-med, I was studying education. We were both in the campus Christian fellowship, both from church families, both committed to building a marriage that honored God. We got married young. I was 23, he was 25, and everyone said we were the perfect couple. Strong in faith, financially stable, no major drama. We had 2 children, Caleb, who's now 11, and Hannah, who's 9. Good kids, honor roll students, active in youth ministry. The kind of children that other church mothers compliment you on, asking what your secret is. And Sarah had been there for all of it. I met Sarah at Faith Covenant when Marcus and I first joined. She was a single mother then, raising her daughter Imani alone after her ex-husband walked out when Imani was just 2 years old. She was struggling, working 2 jobs, barely making rent, dealing with the stigma some church folks put on divorced women. I reached out to her because I saw how isolated she was, how she'd slip in late to service and leave early, avoiding the fellowship hall where everyone gathered. We became friends, real friends, the kind where you don't have to perform or pretend. She'd come over for dinner twice a week. Our kids played together. When she got evicted from her apartment 3 years ago, Marcus and I let her and Imani stay in our guest room for 4 months until she got back on her feet. When I had surgery 2 years ago and couldn't drive for 6 weeks, Sarah took my kids to school every morning and picked them up every afternoon. She was family. She was my sister in Christ. And now she was standing in a prayer circle, holding my hand and my husband's hand, telling me she was sleeping with him to save his soul. I didn't scream, didn't yank my hand away, didn't make a scene. I just stood there, frozen, while Pastor Reynolds continued praying about restoration and healing, completely unaware that the woman he was praying over was being told her marriage was a lie. When the prayer ended and everyone said, "Amen," I opened my eyes. Sarah was looking at me. Not with guilt, not with shame, with something that looked almost like pity. Like she felt sorry for me because I didn't understand the spiritual warfare they were engaged in. Marcus squeezed my hand and smiled at me. That same smile he'd given me that morning over breakfast. That same smile he'd given me Sunday after church when we took family photos in our matching outfits. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his voice so casual, so normal. I pulled my hand away. "I need some air." I walked out of that prayer circle, down the center aisle of the sanctuary, through the lobby, and out into the parking lot. My hands were shaking. My chest was tight. I couldn't breathe properly. Sarah followed me out. "Diane, wait," she called. "Let me explain." I turned to face her. "Explain what, Sarah? Explain how you're sleeping with my husband?" She looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone else had come outside. We were alone. The parking lot was empty except for our cars lined up under the fluorescent lights. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice calm, measured, like she was explaining something simple to a child. "Marcus came to me 6 months ago. He was struggling, spiritually struggling. He told me he was having doubts about his faith, about God, about whether any of it was real. He said he felt like he was going through the motions, going to church, leading devotions at home, praying before meals, but inside he felt empty, dead." I stared at her. "So your solution was to sleep with him?" "No. My solution was to pray with him, to counsel him, to remind him of God's love." She stepped closer. "But Diane, he was in such darkness, such spiritual warfare. The enemy had such a hold on him. And I prayed, asking God what to do, how to reach him, how to pull him back from the edge. And God showed me that Marcus needed to feel loved. Not just spiritually loved, but physically loved, tangibly loved. He needed to be reminded that he was worth something, that he was desired, that he was—" "Are you out of your mind?" I cut her off. "You're justifying adultery as ministry?" "It's not adultery if it's redemptive," she said, and she actually believed it. I could see it in her eyes. She actually believed the words coming out of her mouth. "Diane, I know this sounds crazy to you right now. I know it hurts. But 6 months ago, Marcus was on the verge of leaving the faith, leaving the church, leaving you. He was talking about divorce, about starting over, about walking away from everything, and I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let the enemy win. So I did what I had to do to save his soul." My voice was shaking now. "Did Marcus tell you that? That he wanted to leave me?" "He did. Multiple times. He said he felt trapped. He said the marriage felt like an obligation, not a partnership. He said—" "And you thought sleeping with him would fix that?" "I thought reminding him that he's loved would fix that. And it worked, Diane. Look at him now. He's still here. He's still at church. He's still praying. He's still leading your family. Because I was willing to sacrifice my own comfort, my own reputation, to keep him in the kingdom. I felt like I was in a nightmare, like I'd fallen through some portal into an alternate reality where everything was backwards." "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" 6 months. Since February. 6 months. Half a year. All those nights Marcus said he was working late at the hospital. He's a physician assistant at the county hospital. He was with Sarah. All those times Sarah said she had to work evening shifts at the restaurant. She was with Marcus. All those Wednesdays when she'd show up to prayer service straight from work in her uniform, she'd been with my husband. "Where?" My voice was flat now. "Empty. My apartment. Sometimes his car. Once at the church late at night after a board meeting. At the church. They had defiled the church. Does anyone else know?" She hesitated. "Pastor Reynolds knows." That hit me like a physical blow. Pastor knows? Marcus went to him 3 months ago, confessed everything, asked for counsel. Pastor Reynolds prayed over it and said that if the affair was genuinely being used by God to restore Marcus's faith, then we should continue but be discreet. He said sometimes God uses unconventional methods to reach his children. He said, "Stop." I held up my hand. "Stop talking." I needed to think, needed to process. But my brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Pastor Reynolds knew. The man who'd counseled Marcus and me before we got married. The man who dedicated our children. the man who'd prayed over me when I miscarried between Caleb and Hannah. He knew my husband was sleeping with my best friend, and he'd given it his blessing. Diane. Sarah's voice was soft now, gentle. The voice she'd used when my father died 2 years ago, and she sat with me while I cried. I know this is hard. I know it hurts, but you have to understand. This isn't about me wanting Marcus. This isn't about romance or lust or any of that. This is spiritual warfare. This is me being willing to be used as a vessel to save a man's soul. And it worked. Marcus is restored. His faith is stronger than ever. He's reading his Bible again. He's praying again. He's still sleeping with you. For now. But Pastor Reynolds said, once Marcus is fully restored, once his faith is solid again, we'll end the physical relationship and transition back to just being friends and church family. It's temporary, Diane. It's redemptive. It's adultery. My voice was cold now, clear. It's betrayal. It's sin. And you can dress it up in whatever spiritual language you want, but it doesn't change what it is. She looked at me with those pitying eyes again. I'm sorry you see it that way. I really am. But I'm not sorry I did it, because Marcus's soul is worth more than your temporary discomfort. My temporary discomfort. She'd reduced my shattered marriage to temporary discomfort. I turned and walked to my car, got in, locked the doors, and I sat there in the parking lot, watching through my rearview mirror as Sarah went back inside the church. I needed to decide what to do. But first, I needed to see my husband's face when I confronted him. I waited in that parking lot for another 20 minutes until the prayer service ended and people started filing out. I watched Marcus walk out with Brother James, one of the deacons, laughing about something, looking relaxed, looking normal. I got out of my car and walked toward him. Marcus, I need to talk to you. Now. He saw my face and his expression changed. Diane, what's wrong? Get in the car. Brother James looked between us, sensing the tension. Y'all all right? We're fine, Marcus said quickly. Just need to talk about something. You have a blessed night, Brother James. We got in my car. I didn't start the engine, just sat there in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Sarah told me, I said. In the prayer circle. She told me everything. Silence. Then, Diane, I can explain. Can you? I turned to look at him. Can you explain how you've been sleeping with my best friend for 6 months? How you've been lying to me every single day? How you convinced her it was somehow holy? How you involved our pastor in covering it up? He wouldn't look at me, just stared at his hands. Sarah said you told her you were struggling spiritually, that you wanted to leave me. Is that true? I was struggling, he said quietly. I am struggling. Diane, I didn't know how to tell you. You're so solid in your faith, so sure of everything. And I was drowning in doubt, and I didn't know how to tell you without disappointing you. So you slept with Sarah instead. It wasn't supposed to be like that. At first, we were just talking. She was praying with me, counseling me. And then one night, we were at her apartment, and she said that God had shown her I needed more than words. I needed to feel loved, to feel wanted, to feel like I mattered. And she offered herself, said it was ministry, said it was how God wanted to reach me. I felt sick. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her, because it felt good, Diane. Not just the sex, the attention, the way she looked at me like I was important, like I mattered. You and we've been going through the motions for years. You know we have. We're roommates who happen to go to the same church and raise the same kids. When's the last time you actually looked at me? When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about the kids' schedules or the bills or church events? So this is my fault. My voice was dangerously calm. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I was vulnerable and Sarah offered something I needed and I took it. And I justified it because she kept saying it was from God. And Pastor Reynolds said, what exactly did Pastor Reynolds say? Marcus sighed. I went to him 3 months in. I was drowning in guilt. I told him everything. He prayed over me and said that sometimes God uses unorthodox methods to reach his children. He said if the affair was genuinely restoring my faith, which it was, Diane, I was reading my Bible again, praying again, feeling connected to God again, then maybe it was a necessary season. He said to be discreet, to be prayerful, and to trust that God would make it clear when it was time to end it. I laughed, actually laughed. A bitter, broken sound. So let me understand this. You, my best friend, and my pastor all decided that adultery was God's will for my marriage, and nobody thought to include me in that conversation. Sarah wanted to tell you from the beginning. I'm the one who said no. I was scared of losing you, scared of losing the kids, scared of what the church would think. But you weren't scared enough to stop. He didn't answer. I started the car. Get out. Diane, get out. Where are you going? To Pastor Reynolds's house. If he blessed this mess, he's going to explain it to my face. Marcus got out of the car. I drove away, leaving him standing in the church parking lot. Pastor Reynolds lived about 15 minutes from the church in a nice brick house in a quiet neighborhood. I'd been there dozens of times, for leadership meetings, for counseling sessions, for dinners after Sunday service. His wife, First Lady Gloria, was one of the women I looked up to. She'd been married to Pastor for 32 years. She led the Married Women's Fellowship. She taught Bible studies on being a godly wife. I wondered if she knew. I parked in their driveway and knocked on the door. First Lady Gloria answered, surprised to see me at 9:30 on a Wednesday night. Sister Diane, is everything all right? Is Pastor home? I need to speak with him. It's urgent. She saw my face and her expression shifted to concern. Of course. Come in, baby. He's in his study. She led me down the hall to Pastor's study, a small room lined with books, a large desk in the center, a cross on the wall. Pastor Reynolds looked up from his computer when we entered. Sister Diane, what brings you by so late? First Lady Gloria excused herself, closing the door behind her. I stood in front of his desk. Did you know my husband is sleeping with Sarah Thompson? Pastor Reynolds's face didn't change. No surprise, no shock, just a slow, measured nod. I did know. Marcus came to me about 3 months ago. And you told him it was okay. I didn't tell him it was okay. I told him that I would pray over the situation and seek God's guidance. He folded his hands on his desk. Sister Diane, I know this is difficult for you to understand. Oh, it's not difficult to understand, Pastor. It's very clear. My husband told you he was committing adultery, and you told him to keep doing it. That's not exactly what I said. Then what exactly did you say? Pastor Reynolds stood up, came around his desk, and gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs. I didn't move. He sighed. Sister Diane, when Marcus came to me, he was in spiritual crisis. He told me he was on the verge of walking away from his faith entirely. He said the only thing keeping him tethered to God was Sister Sarah's ministry to him. Now I'll admit, when he told me the nature of that ministry, I was troubled, very troubled. But I also knew that Marcus was serious about his spiritual decline. I'd noticed it myself. He'd been distant during worship, disengaged during men's Bible study, going through the motions. So you decided adultery was the answer. I decided that if God was using an unconventional situation to restore one of his children, I wasn't going to stand in the way. I told Marcus to pray, to be discreet, to seek God's face, and to trust that when the season of restoration was complete, God would make it clear. I stared at him. Are you hearing yourself, Pastor? You're a shepherd. Your job is to protect the flock, to call out sin, to hold people accountable. And instead, you covered up adultery and called it ministry. Sister Diane, I understand you're hurt. I'm not hurt, Pastor. I'm furious, and I'm done. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? To pack my husband's bags. And then I'm calling an emergency meeting with the deacon board, because if you think adultery is acceptable ministry, you're not fit to lead this church. I walked out of that study, past First Lady Gloria, who was standing in the hallway looking concerned, and out to my car. I drove home. Marcus's car wasn't in the driveway yet. He was probably still at the church, trying to figure out what to do. Good. That gave me time. I went upstairs to our bedroom, pulled out 2 large suitcases from the closet, and started packing his clothes. Shirts, pants, shoes, toiletries, everything. I worked mechanically, my hands moving on autopilot while my brain processed everything that had happened in the last 2 hours. My marriage was over, that much was clear. My friendship with Sarah was over, obviously. But what about my church? What about my position as women's ministry leader? What about my kids, who loved Faith Covenant, who had friends there, who'd grown up in that community? I was almost done packing when I heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway. He came upstairs, saw the suitcases on the bed, and stopped in the doorway. "Diane, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You're leaving. Tonight. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Sarah's apartment, maybe. Or a hotel. Or your car. I don't care. But you're not staying here." "What about the kids?" "The kids are asleep. And tomorrow morning, you're going to come back, and we're going to sit down with them together, and you're going to tell them that Daddy made some bad choices and needs to live somewhere else for a while. And you're going to do it without lying to them, without making excuses, without blaming anyone else." "Diane, I love you. I know I messed up, but I love you. We can work through this. We can get counseling. We can—" "You slept with my best friend for 6 months. You involved our pastor in covering it up. You looked me in the eye every single day and lied. There's nothing to work through, Marcus. It's over." He started to cry. "Please, don't do this. Think about the kids. Think about the church. Think about—" "I am thinking about the kids. And I'm thinking they deserve to see their mother have enough self-respect to walk away from a man who betrayed her. Now get your bags and go." He stood there for a long moment, tears running down his face. Then he picked up the suitcases and walked out. I heard his car start, heard him drive away, and then I collapsed on the bed and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The next morning I called Deacon Williams, the chairman of the deacon board. I told him I needed an emergency meeting. He asked what it was about. I said I'd explain when everyone was present. The meeting was set for that Saturday morning at the church. I also called my sister in Atlanta and told her what happened. She offered to fly up and stay with me. I told her not yet. I needed to handle this first, then I'd need her help with the kids. On Thursday, I got a call from First Lady Gloria. She wanted to meet for coffee. I agreed. We met at a small cafe near the church. She ordered tea. I ordered coffee I didn't drink. "Sister Diane, I want you to know I didn't know anything about Marcus and Sarah until last night when you came to the house." I believed her. I'd seen the shock on her face. "How long have you been married to Pastor Reynolds?" 32 years. "Have you ever seen him counsel someone to continue in adultery before?" She looked down at her tea. "No. But I've seen him do things I didn't agree with in the name of ministry. He's a good man, Diane. But he's also a man who believes the end justifies the means sometimes. He believes that keeping people in the church, keeping them connected to God, is worth almost any cost. Even if that cost is enabling sin? Apparently." She looked at me, her eyes sad. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I'm sorry my husband played a role in it. Are you going to stay with him?" "Yes. Because despite his flaws, despite his terrible judgment in this situation, he's still my husband. And I still believe in our covenant, but I won't defend what he did, and if the deacon board decides to remove him, I'll support that decision." I respected her honesty. Saturday morning came. I arrived at the church at 9 o'clock. The deacon board was already assembled. 5 men and 2 women, all longtime members, all people I'd known for years. Deacon Williams opened with prayer, then turned to me. "Sister Diane, you called this meeting. Please tell us what's going on." I told them everything. The prayer circle confession, Sarah's justification, Marcus's admission, Pastor Reynolds' counsel. I showed them text messages I'd found on Marcus's phone that I'd screenshotted before he left. Messages between him and Sarah. Messages between him and Pastor Reynolds discussing the ministry. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Deaconess Martin spoke first. Pastor Reynolds told your husband to continue in adultery? He told him to pray and be discreet and trust that God would reveal when it was time to stop. Deacon Williams shook his head. That's not biblical counsel. That's enabling sin. We need to confront Pastor Reynolds, Deacon Jackson said. Bring him in here. Ask him directly. They called Pastor Reynolds. He arrived 30 minutes later, First Lady Gloria with him. Deacon Williams didn't waste time. Pastor, Sister Diane has made some serious allegations about counsel you gave to her husband regarding his affair. We need to hear your side. Pastor Reynolds sat down, composed. What Sister Diane told you is accurate. Marcus came to me 3 months ago and confessed he was having an affair with Sister Sarah. He also told me that this relationship had restored his faith after a season of deep spiritual crisis. I prayed over the situation and felt led to tell him to continue praying, to be discreet, and to trust God's timing. You told him to continue the affair? Deaconess Martin's voice was incredulous. I told him to continue seeking God. I didn't explicitly tell him to stop the affair because I believed God was using it redemptively. Deacon Williams closed his eyes, visibly struggling with what he was hearing. Pastor, with all due respect, that's not shepherding. That's negligence. You had a responsibility to call out sin, to protect Sister Diane, to uphold the sanctity of marriage. Instead, you gave Marcus permission to continue destroying his family. I gave him permission to continue pursuing God, Pastor Reynolds corrected. By sleeping with another woman. Deacon Jackson's voice was hard. Pastor, I've been under your leadership for 18 years. I've respected you. I've defended you. But I can't defend this. The room erupted in conversation. The deacons and deaconesses debating, questioning, some defending Pastor Reynolds, others calling for his removal. Finally, Deacon Williams called for order. We're going to take a vote. All in favor of suspending Pastor Reynolds pending a full investigation and possible removal, raise your hand. 6 hands went up, including First Lady Gloria's. Pastor Reynolds's face went pale. Gloria, I love you, she said quietly. But this was wrong, and you need to face the consequences. That Sunday, I wasn't at church. Neither was Marcus or Sarah. But I heard from multiple people what happened. Deacon Williams stood at the pulpit and announced that Pastor Reynolds had been suspended. He explained in broad terms that the pastor had given unbiblical counsel regarding adultery and had enabled sin rather than confronting it. He didn't mention names, mine, Marcus's, or Sarah's, but the church was small enough that people figured it out quickly. Sarah stopped coming to church entirely. Marcus moved in with his brother across town, and I stayed home with my kids, trying to figure out what came next. The deacon board completed their investigation over the next 6 weeks. They interviewed Marcus, Sarah, and Pastor Reynolds. They reviewed the text messages. They consulted with denominational leadership. In the end, they voted to remove Pastor Reynolds from his position as senior pastor. The vote was unanimous. First Lady Gloria stood by him through it all, but she also made it clear to the church that she didn't condone what he'd done. Marcus filed for divorce about 2 months after that Wednesday night prayer circle. I didn't contest it. We set up a custody arrangement for the kids, week on, week off. We sold the house and split the proceeds. We divided our lives as cleanly as 2 people can after 12 years of marriage. Sarah moved to another city about 6 months later. I heard she joined a church there and told people she was a widow, not a divorcee. I haven't spoken to her since that night in the parking lot. Marcus eventually started dating someone new, not Sarah. A nurse from the hospital, someone who didn't know the whole story. I hope he's honest with her. I hope he's learned something. As for me, I left Faith Covenant Church, not because I was ashamed, not because I was running away, but because I couldn't worship in a place where my trauma had become the subject of gossip and speculation. I needed a fresh start. I found a new church across town, a smaller congregation, fewer programs, but genuine people. People who welcomed me and my kids without asking questions. People who let me heal without demanding explanations. I'm not women's ministry leader anymore. I'm just a member, just a woman trying to raise her kids and rebuild her life and hold on to her faith when it would be easier to let it go. And I've learned something through all of this. The prayer circle isn't the safest place on earth. The church building isn't the safest place on earth. Your best friend isn't the safest place on earth. Your husband isn't the safest place on earth. The only safe place is God Himself. And sometimes He allows everything else to be shaken, so you remember that. There's a verse in Hebrews 12 that I've been clinging to. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. I could have let bitterness grow. I could have let what Marcus and Sarah did to me turn me into someone angry and hard and closed off. I could have let Pastor Reynolds' failure make me cynical about church leadership forever. But I chose not to. Not because I'm strong, but because I'm tired. And bitterness takes more energy than I have to give. Instead, I'm choosing to trust that God sees, that He knows, that He's working even in the betrayal, even in the pain, even in the moments when the people I trusted most proved untrustworthy. He's still faithful, even when they weren't. If you think that was the end of this story, it wasn't. Because 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of Sarah, very pregnant, standing next to Marcus outside what looked like a courthouse. On the back, someone had written in the same unfamiliar handwriting, "Some miracles take 9 months. Take 9. That story, what I discovered about that baby, about who really sent me that photograph, and about the woman from my new church who turned out to know more about my old life than she ever should have. You need to click the next story on your screen when you're ready, because some betrayals don't end, they just evolve. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted in a church setting, hit that like button. Drop a comment below. You don't have to share your whole story, just let me know you're here. Because sometimes the most healing thing is knowing you're not the only one who's been through this. And subscribe to this channel. We share stories every week about faith, betrayal, restoration, and the messy reality of trying to follow God in a broken world. This is Diane Mitchell, reminding you that the prayer circle might fail you. Your best friend might fail you. Your pastor might fail you. Even your spouse might fail you, but God never will. Be blessed.